In the New Testament, Sarah is held up as an example of a godly wife. In 1 Peter chapter 3, it says of Sarah, listen to what it says. It says that she trusted in God and she obeyed Abraham. It does not say she trusted Abraham. It says she trusted God and obeyed Abraham. She trusted God and obeyed her husband. It doesn't say she trusted her husband. And I'd imagine for Sarah it was very difficult for her to trust her husband at times, as it is for any wife. Especially when you have a husband who suddenly faces a crisis and he stops seeking God. You don't see him building an altar. You don't see him praying. You don't see him calling on the name of the Lord. And all of a sudden now your husband, who's already moved you 1,000 miles away from your family, your home, and everything that you know, to bring you to this land because he feels like God told him that you're supposed to move there and that God's got great blessing for you there. And you get there and there's a famine, and now your husband says, we're moving to Egypt. And Sarah trusted God and obeyed her husband. And she went along to Egypt, and she followed her husband into Egypt. And so, sometimes, wives, you ask the question, do I have to follow my husband if he's doing something stupid? Right? Well, as long as it's not something illegal, and as long as it's not something that is going to bring some kind of physical harm, maybe, to you. But yeah, you follow your husband even if he's doing something stupid. As hard as that is. You trust God. And you obey your husband. Go with him on it. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's easy for me to say that to you. It's hard to live it out. Sarah followed her husband into Egypt. Verse 11 now. And it came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt. So he says, so from where they were in the Promised Land down to where they're going in Egypt, it's like a 225-mile journey. She's already walked 1,000 miles from Ur all the way to the Promised Land. And now the first crisis, and her husband says, we're going to go on to Egypt. Now they're almost to Egypt. They're almost to the border. They're about to enter Egypt. And Abraham turns to his wife Sarah and says, indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Let me just stop right there and say, Sarah was 65 years old at this time. He's going to say this again of her when she's about 90 years old, that she's a beautiful woman at 90. So she must have been a very strikingly beautiful woman, especially as we see this story progress. He's concerned that she's so beautiful here that he's going to get killed because of her beauty. Although this word beautiful, when he talks about the beauty of his wife, it may not mean what we think it means. Because in Genesis 41, the same phrase is used to describe the beauty of a cow. So maybe they measured beauty differently. Because I wouldn't talk about the beauty of my wife and the beauty of a cow the same way. But they do. So I don't know. So it came to pass, as they're entering Egypt, he says to his wife, hey, look, we're about to go into Egypt, and I know you're beautiful. Honey, let me just tell you, first of all, I think you're beautiful. Therefore, because you're so beautiful, it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. Abraham's really failing this test. I mean, can you imagine if you were Abraham's friend and he's telling you this story and you're going to say, you said what? to Sarah? You asked her to do what? Are you serious? You actually said that to her? Abraham wanted Sarah to lie and say that she was his sister and not his wife, which is actually a half-truth, because we're told in Genesis 20 that Abraham and Sarah were actually half-brother and sister. So this is a half-truth, but a half-truth is really a full lie. So he wants his wife to lie. And it seems that Abraham's logic here is when they get down to Egypt and they see how beautiful his wife is, if someone wants to marry Sarah, they will negotiate with a brother, but they're just going to kill a husband. Right? And so that seems to be what his thinking is here. And so he's safer if she says she's his sister. In verse 13, Abraham tells Sarah, "Say you're my sister, that it may go well with me." It may not go so well with you, but it's going to go well with me if you say you're my sister, that I may live because of you. Now, in Ephesians 5, we're given instructions on the marriage relationship. And Ephesians 5 commands husbands to love your wife as Christ loved the church, giving himself for her. Husbands are commanded to lay down their lives for their wives and sacrifice self for the sake of your wife. Abraham wants his wife to sacrifice herself for him. Abraham wants, the opposite of what God says to do. He wants her to sacrifice for him to save his own neck. He's acting selfishly here in the marriage. He's self-serving in the marriage. Not to mention his actions put his wife in danger. Maybe Abraham thought, if someone asked to marry his sister, he could just say, no, she's not. She's not available. But I want you to note here, as we're going through this, I want you to note when Abraham faced this challenge to his faith, Abraham responded with lying. And Abraham responded with deception to save his own neck and to get him out of this situation. He's going to react the same way in chapter 20. When we get there, he's going to ask his wife to lie again, and he's going to be deceptive again. Lying and deception was his default response to a crisis. This is how Abraham gets out of a crisis. He lies. He deceives people. Everyone, listen to me, give me your attention. Everyone has a default response to a crisis. Everyone has a default response to a trial, especially when your neck is on the line. Maybe you respond by lying and deceiving like Abraham. Maybe you react with anger and shouting and cussing and yelling. Maybe you shift the blame to someone else. Maybe you gaslight people. Some people turn to drinking. Some people turn to drugs to escape. But everyone has some kind of default response to trials, especially when your neck is on the line. For Abraham, it was lying. That's just the kind of guy he was. If he gets in a tight jam, he's going to lie and deceive to get out of it. That's just who he is. Verse 14 says, "So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh," so Pharaoh's, court or whatever, "also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house." So, they come into Egypt, and sure enough, people notice her beauty. Those that work for Pharaoh happen to see her, commend her to Pharaoh, and she is brought to Pharaoh's house. Maybe Abraham never thought it was going to rise to the level of Pharaoh here, but now he finds himself in Pharaoh's house, and Pharaoh is interested in Sarah. This would have been a good time for Abraham to tell the truth. This would have been a good time for Abraham to come clean and say, you know what, this is just all a big misunderstanding. But he doesn't.